It's time to talk Xbox mods. Okay, so in a previous video you saw me talking about this Xbox here. I showed you how it was originally with the casing all completely beaten up with the plastic falling off, and yeah, it looked like it had had some kind of an impact at some point. The machine worked, but the casing was in terrible shape, as you saw. And I talked about how I swapped it out for the case of another Xbox that had a much bigger issue in the fact that the machine would not work at all. The motherboard was completely trashed. And I touched upon Xbox modding in that particular video, and I said that I'd go for a video, talk about Xbox modding a little bit more. And this came to my attention even more so with the Modern Vintage Gamer, who's an awesome tuber. He did a video in regards to Xbox modding, and he went through a very quick process, a quick overview of doing Xbox modding and some of the benefits of it. And I thought that I would talk about my experiences with Xbox modding, because I've been sort of in the modding scene, so to speak, since back in 2003. And when I say in the scene, I kept abreast of all the new things that were going on with the mod chips when they came about, with soft modding when that also happened. And basically, very similar to what I've got here, I had a Crystal Xbox that was completely stock that I used for online play, because back then, if you used a modified Xbox online, you'd get banned from Xbox Live because they could detect that. And I had a mod chip modified Xbox that I bought off of a good friend of mine's cousin who was selling it, and he modded Xboxes and was pretty good at it, so I bought one from him. So you may have an Xbox lying around, you may have stumbled across this video. This isn't a tutorial by any means, guys. This isn't a step-by-step of how you do the mods, what you need to do, etc. This is just kind of an overview and some considerations that you might want to make if you did decide, yeah, I'd like to mod an Xbox because I've got one. I've heard about these really cool things, additional things you can do besides just playing games, which by default is all these can do. They can only play original Xbox discs. When you mod them, suddenly you open up a whole world of homebrew, alternative dashboards, emulators, and also putting games onto the hard disk and playing them off the hard drive, but I will come on to that and talk about hard disks a little bit later on. So, the way I see it, and to simplify this as much as I possibly can, there is two types of mod. There is a hardware mod, so a mod chip. This particular Xbox here has got the Executor 2.3B Lite that you saw me showing in that other video. I've managed to get it working by bridging a couple of contacts to tell the chip to be active, and I've flashed a really cool BIOS onto there, which is awesome. And that's installed in this box and works perfectly, so the chip actually works, which is great. It's just the board that would normally be sat out the front, the control board, doesn't work. So this one is hard modded, you could basically say. This one here is also hard modded. In the last video I talked about that. It was originally soft modded, but I had it hard modded. I've flashed the TSOP, and that's something else I'm going to talk about in this video as well. So these are two sort of hard modding examples. Mod chip and also TSOP flashed, and originally was soft modded. And the other option is, of course, soft mods. So modifying the software on these consoles so that they can boot with an exploit and then load up an alternative dashboard and kind of take it from there. Now, the cool thing is, soft modding can be done on any Xbox console revision. It doesn't matter if it's a 1.0 motherboard or a 1.6B. It can be done on any Xbox, and it's very straightforward. Basically, it's the easiest mod out of a lot of them. Very easy to go through, very straightforward. The tutorials will be super easy to follow for it. Generally speaking, it involves a game that'll have an exploited save game. You can see here I've got a copy of Splinter Cell. Has to be an original copy of said game. I think there's a few others as well. I think Mech Assault, and there's a 007 game that can also be exploited with a save game, which will allow you to install the soft mod. So you need basically a working Xbox. It has to be working, it has to boot to its own dashboard without issue, i.e. not have a hard disk problem or a DVD drive problem, or worse still, it just won't turn on. And you need to have a original copy of whatever game it is with the save game. And in addition to that, you're also going to need something else that I showed you in the previous video. This is actually a Xbox controller cable to USB adapter. And the reason you need this is because that is how you're going to get the soft modded files onto your Xbox, the soft modded saves onto your Xbox, is by using this. Now, one thing that wasn't mentioned, and I'm going to quickly mention, is about the flash drive situation. This wasn't mentioned on Modern Vintage Gamer's video. This is information, by the way, that I got from watching Slot One Gamer, and I'm going to give a shout out to Slot One Gamer. He's a fantastic YouTuber. He's got videos all about soft modding and TSOP flashing and upgrading the hard drive. Yeah, he's a super cool guy. Please check his channel out. I'll put a link in the description to Slot One Gamer, especially if you're interested in Xbox modding, because his videos are brilliant and I followed them in particular when I did the TSOP for that Xbox. So, flash drives. You need to try and find the cheapest, smallest, unbranded, most generic flash drive that you can find, in my experience, and also in other people's experience that have done Xbox modding. Because I used a SanDisk Cruiser Blade flash disk that I've got, which is 128 gigabytes, it's a new one. The Xbox was having none of it. It basically says the memory unit is not functioning properly when you plug this in and then obviously plug the USB stick into there to try and format it, because you have to do that first. You have to plug the USB stick into the adapter, into the Xbox, and on the menu, in the memory area, you have to let it pick this up and format it if it's going to work. And it might take you a few flash drives, going for a few different flash drives before it'll actually start working. You need to do that step first. Don't put it in your Windows PC first and format it and then expect it to work on the Xbox. It won't. So make sure you put it in the Xbox first. It shows up as a memory unit number 2, as if it's plugged into controller 2. Essentially, it's plugged into controller port 2. And then from that point onwards, once it's formatted, which it will tell you that it's going to format it, so any data on there will be lost, then you can plug it into your PC, but do not click format when it prompts you to do so. And then at that point in time is when you'd use Explorer 360 to actually copy across the save files that are needed for the softmod installation. Now, the softmod installation is very, very easy, but it's not without its risks. You can leave yourself completely stuck if you do things wrong, if you mess about and do things wrong. My recommendation is really don't mess about with hard drive locking with the original hard disk in place. Just don't do it. Leave it locked to the console, because if you unlock the drive for whatever reason, I'm not sure why you'd want to with just a soft mod, and then you forget to lock it and the machine is turned off, and then you turn it back on again, you're going to get an error code and you're going to be stuck. And your only real answer then is essentially to hard mod, not by TSOP flashing, because a prerequisite of TSOP is to actually have a soft modded console in the first place that's working. You're going to have to install a mod chip like I've got in here. And the Aladdin XT Plus is a mod chip that you can still get hold of, but I'll talk a little bit more about mod chips when I get to that point. So soft modding is super easy, but what you're going to find is that your standard Xbox hard drive, you can see I've actually got one here with a standard IDE cable plugged into it, is not going to be very big. The capacity of it is not going to be very big at all. Ran about 8 gigabytes. I've heard people say 10 gigabytes on some models. So you're not going to be storing particularly very much, especially if you've heard about CoinOps, which is an awesome front-end / emulator that's got over 4,000 games on it from arcade machines and obviously consoles, home computers. You're not going to be able to put that on this, because that is a massive 90 gigabyte download for the biggest one that I've seen, the biggest package that I've seen for that. So the first thing you're going to want to address is the hard drive. Now, with a soft modded console, you can't simply just swap the drive out and just put another hard disk in there that you picked up. And also, as I mentioned, it's IDE. The Xbox uses IDE. A modern day drive uses SATA, which is a completely different connection type. There are ways of using SATA drives. I've actually got an adapter, but I've also had to get an uprated 80 wire or 80 pin IDE cable in order for that adapter to work. Otherwise it doesn't work at all, it doesn't play. So that's something to consider. But yeah, with a soft modded console, you can upgrade the hard drive, but it is not straightforward. You can't just shove a drive in there. Basically, you're going to have to do a little bit of a sort of a ghetto setup. In my case, what I did was I used an external power supply, which I've got, plug that into this hard disk, and then what you have to do is once you've got this booted up, you can then hot swap the cable from the back of the DVD drive to this. Using a utility called Chimp, you can then actually copy the contents of your normal standard drive to this one, which will set up all the partitions and everything for you. And then critically, once it's copied all the files, lock the drive. But that's cool. You've then got 2 drives that are locked to your Xbox, and that means you can then swap over the bigger drive. Bob's your uncle. You've got more capacity, and it becomes much more useful. You can then use it to copy games across to the console. But yeah, due to a security feature inside an Xbox that's either completely stock or that's only been soft modded, you need to have a hard disk that is locked to the console with the unique key that is with that console. If not, you're going to get an error code because the machine has to unlock the drive before it boots. And it won't be able to, and you'll get an error. The same for the DVD drive. When you boot the machine, soft modded or standard, the drive has to be connected. The machine has to accept the fact that it's there, see that it's there, and communicate with it. If it can't, it won't boot. Now, T-SOPPing. This is where things get a little bit more interesting. T-SOPPing is a little bit more risky because if you've got a console revision that can do it, i.e. it's not a 1.6 or 1.6b, which doesn't have a T-SOP, so you can't T-SOP flash it, there's either a couple of points on the motherboard that you have to kind of, bridge together, which are quite small points. It's quite tricky and quite risky. If you get it wrong, you could completely break the machine. And there's also an earlier revision of Xbox that's got a Sharp branded T-SOP flash chip inside it. And if it's got the Sharp branded flash, then you have to have a couple of wires soldered to a couple of points. And when it comes to actually flashing the chip with the utility, the Sharp utility, then you have to join the wires together at that point. So it's a bit fiddly with certain T-SOP flashes. But on the whole, for the most part, the most common T-SOP flash chips you're going to come across, it's a bit easier. There's also different brands, as I mentioned. There's Sharp, there's also, I think it's Hynix is another one. There's ST, and there's also Winbond. Pay attention to which brand of T-SOP you've got. If in doubt, Google it and have a look at what's inside your Xbox. And make sure that you're aware of it. Winbond has got like a W on it, which is cool. Both of these are identical. They've both got Winbond T-SOP flash chips inside them. And I've actually flashed both T-SOP chips in these consoles. So even if the mod chip fails in this, the T-SOP flash is still there. I can still use it exactly the same way as when it was mod chipped, essentially. So the benefit to T-SOPPing is really, really good. It's really, really high because you can flash a completely custom BIOS to the machine, and that BIOS changes the way the Xbox operates from the get-go as soon as you turn it on. So whereas before it had to have a DVD drive that was plugged in, functional and working, it doesn't care anymore because the BIOS has removed the need for that. Also, the hard disk no longer has to be locked to the console, so you could just swap out the hard disk, but then you would need some way, so you'd need a working DVD drive at that point to boot one of the dashboard/hard disk utility disks. I've got one that I downloaded called Hexen Tools that I use to set up my hard drives. It's got all the things on there that you could possibly need, including the T-SOP flashing utilities. But yeah, it can be risky soldering them T-SOP points together. I really would say if you're going to do that, be very, very careful and have a steady hand and a small solder tip on your soldering iron. Just take it easy and be very, very careful. There's a BIOS checker disk that you can download and burn and run on the machine to make sure that your T-SOP is identified by that. If it says it's unknown, then you're not going to be able to flash the T-SOP because it's not unwrite protected, or the write protection is not turned off because you haven't managed to get them points soldered together properly, or however it works. So yeah, but pay attention to the flash chip and pick the right flashing utility. Use the Hexen Tools disk. It basically helps you run through that. If all's well, your machine will reboot and you'll have a lovely different customized BIOS. It might have EvoX at the top corner of the screen depending on which one you flash to it, or it might have a different boot sequence, different boot screen, etc. But it does make Xbox modding so much easier once you've done that. So you can then just chuck a bigger hard disk in, as I said, get the dashboard and everything on there, get it all set up, and yeah, you're really pretty much good to go. Now, I mentioned that 1.6 and 1.6b motherboards cannot be T-SOP flashed, but they can be soft modded. Can they be hard modded in any way? Can they have a mod chip installed? Well, the answer to that is a big yes, they can. So again, Aladdin XT Plus mod chips still exist, they're still around. It does involve some soldering, so that's the only thing. You're going to need to have decent soldering skills, being able to work with some small points because there's some quite tiny points on the motherboard, including the infamous D0 point. So you really are going to have decent soldering skills in order to be able to install the mod chip. But once it's in there, again, you're essentially going to have the same as a T-SOP flashed box in regards to the fact that you can have upgraded hard disks. You can easily upgrade the hard disk. It doesn't have to worry about the DVD drive. With a mod chip, you can switch it off. Now, back in the day, back in sort of 2003 to about 2006, In fact, beyond that, because Xbox Live on the original Xbox was switched off in 2010. So from that kind of time frame, the ability to turn a mod chip off would have been useful. Or the ability to boot an Xbox, a soft modded Xbox, with a game so the soft mod doesn't load, so you won't get banned on Xbox Live, is useful. In 2018, it doesn't matter, because you're not going to be going on Xbox Live with these machines. So that's why with this one I've kind of hardwired the mod chip, hard jumped the mod chip to always be on, because I don't care. This thing's never going to see the light of Xbox Day, Xbox Live Day at all, so why would I need to worry about switching it off? I don't. So yeah, hopefully that's given you some ideas if you've got an Xbox lying around and you want to know what to do with it. Obviously, identify what motherboard version you've got. It's pretty easy to do. It's usually done on the manufacturing date, and also you'll see by some of the chips on the board that'll also help you identify what kind of, what version of motherboard you've got inside the console, and that will kind of determine which route to take, whether you can T-SOP it or whether you're just going to go straight for the mod chip. So, do I recommend doing this? Well, if you want to play original Xbox games and you want to have a collection of them loaded on the hard drive because you've upgraded the hard drive, yeah, definitely, because it is so useful, so handy to have, and I love the fact that I've got these Xboxes with upgraded hard disks, with Xbox games on the drive, and also with CoinOps with all those arcade emulators and ROMs and whatnot. It's awesome. But it's not the only way to have emulators, especially things like arcade and console game emulators. No, it's not. And it probably isn't the best way to do it in 2018 either. By far and away the best way, for me, in my opinion, and is what I'd recommend to the vast majority of people, unless they really do want to mod their Xbox, I'd be telling them to get something like this, like one of these small board computers. This particular one is a Raspberry Pi 3 Model B, but there does exist other ones, including ones that are more powerful, and thus can actually run different emulators, more powerful emulators for things like the Nintendo 64, for example. So yeah, I mean, for most people, if they approach me saying they want to play some classic games using emulators, including things like MAME and arcade emulation, then I'd say look no further than the Raspberry Pi, because this thing, yeah, with the right sort of RetroPie setup, is really awesome and really easy to get set up. And yeah, you can use a wireless controller, rig this up to your modern day television set via HDMI, and it all looks great. So I would definitely recommend this if anybody approached me about just having an emulation machine that can play classic arcade games or classic console games. Or I'd even say, like I said in my PS3 or the console, the Commodore 64 video where I showed the custom firmware PS3, I'd recommend that if you can get access to one of those, because again, it's a console that you might still be playing games on because it's a PS3, and you can upgrade the hard drive really easily on those generally. And again, there's a lot of good emulation options, plus you can load PS1 games, there's ways of playing PS2 games on it. It becomes a really versatile system and really good. So guys, I hope I haven't bored you to death. I know this is a long video. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, put them below. As I said, check out Slot One Gamer, because he's got a lot of videos about Xbox modding and also Modern Vintage Gamer. And I will catch you again soon.